Good morning. Hi, Shelby. Good morning. Welcome to Period Action Day, guys. We're super excited to kick this day off. It's been a lot of work put into place, and we're especially excited for this training. We have, quite a few youth activists in the movement, and I know everybody here does quite a bit of work within their own community, combating period poverty and working, towards menstrual equity. So we have today we have a co-director of the Midwest Academy, who's going to be leading a training for us today, and I'll let her introduce herself a little more and kind of talk about the work they do. But we're hoping this training today can give everyone more insight onto how to work more closely on the ground and organize to have more effective outcomes towards menstrual equity.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jay Travis, pronouns she, her, hers. I am co-director at Midwest Academy. The Midwest Academy is a national training institute which supports struggles for racial, economic, and social justice. The Academy was created some 48 years ago by folks who came together from the mass movements of the 60s. So folks from the women's movements, the civil rights movements, the students' movements, the anti-war movements created a training institute to make sure that organizing, training, and strategy development was available to folks regardless of race, gender, or geography. That's just a little bit about what the Academy does. We have a strong emphasis on strategy development, which I'll talk a bit more about. In terms of my background, I'm an organizer based in Chicago for many years. I've worked with intergenerational, multi-issue grassroots organizations. I've also done some work across sector in terms of working with community organizations and labor organizations around education justice and affordable housing issues. And nationally, I worked with alliances focused on eliminating racial injustice and systemic racism in the public education systems in this country. So all of that, I've also done some electoral stuff. We can talk about that on another day. But glad to be here with you all and to learn about the important work you're doing. I am tasked with synthesizing what is probably several hours of information into a very short presentation. So we're going to talk about what do we mean by organizing? How is it defined? How is it different from other methodologies connected to winning social change? And then we'll talk about strategy development. When we work in our communities and we identify problems and then we create our own solutions to those problems, which are our issues, how do we then organize to build the power we need to win on those issues? And a lot of that deals with strategy development. So let's start by organizing. We're moving in circles, and we hear the term organizing. We gotta organize. What is meant by organizing? What is meant by power? What is meant by strategy? We're gonna unpack a little bit of that today. So because it's a webinar, I'm assuming I can't ask questions and get responses. I'm more sharing information. Is that sort of how the platform is set up?
Yeah, so anyone who's here can ask questions through the Q&A.
Through the chat, okay. Yep.
And then.
So we'll just get started. Is it okay to start to share my screen?
Yeah, feel free.
All right, let's dig in a little bit.
All right.
So you all have to enable me to share the screen. I may have to be a co-host.
Oh, let's look at that. 1 second here.
Yeah. In the meantime, I want everyone on the call to just take a minute and think about what comes to mind when you hear the word organize. And if you have a pad or a phone or something that you can jot down a few thoughts on, just jot them down. When you hear organize, how do you define it?
Okay. So,
And you can share some of your thoughts in the chat. Someone says to you, organize. What does that mean to you? Ah, I see some things coming in the chat. Gather people together. That's right. In organizing, one of our main sources of power are the people that we can bring together to fight for justice. So that's good. Anyone else, when you hear the word organize, what comes to your mind? Leadership and community. That's right. Organizing is about what we can do together once we are unified around common goals. Planning. Ah, some folks here thinking about strategy. I like that. Planning. What's our overall plan to build the power we need to win? And coming together for the greater good. What is the vision of the world we want to create? And how do we use our organizing work to move us toward that vision? You all don't seem to need me much. You're already on the same page. You know, I always say at Midwest Academy, I can share my screen now. I always say at the Academy, we don't look at ourselves as being the people who hold all the knowledge and information. What we like to do in our trainings is to create an environment in which we can all share our experiences and the things that we've learned. And we don't look at ourselves as the repositories of all knowledge and information. So together we can learn and share. And now I'm going to share with you a few definitions in terms of how the Academy looks at direct action organizing and how we define it. All of you were, of course, on the right track in terms of the information that you shared. So when we think about organizing, sometimes it's helpful as we sort of hone in on our definition to look at the distinctions between organizing and other methods of addressing social problems. So here along this continuum, we see a number of different approaches to addressing social problems. We see social services, which involves providing services directly to meet an individual's need. Self-help, a process in which some people impacted by a problem might provide individual support to other people that are impacted by the problem, still along the service trajectory. We see research and education. Research and education is often used to help us understand the scale and the depth of the problem. It helps us to bring data into, our plans and help us articulate, how this problem is impacting people and how deep that impact is. And then we move to advocacy. And in advocacy, we work with folks that often speak out on behalf of folks that are most impacted. And they bring in a certain set of skills that help us sort of think about how our solutions might be expressed in terms of how we might work with public policy. But it's usually some people thinking about how to work with or act on behalf of others. But when we get over to direct action organizing is a bit different. At this end of the spectrum, we're working within the existing relations of power. But when we move toward direct action organizing, we're challenging the existing relationship of power because we're saying that organizing brings together people most impacted by a particular issue to build the power that we need to challenge decision makers that are usually in the public or private sector. So the difference in terms of this approach is, one, it centers people most impacted in building and taking collective action to put pressure on those in power. And it shifts, hopefully, the relations of power in the process. So in terms of defining organizing, we say there are a couple of foundational thoughts. We say that you don't win just by being right. Now, I want you all to share in the chat why you all think we might say that. Why don't you just win by being right? Let's just jump in the chat with some responses to that. Why don't we just win by being right? Let's take a couple of pieces. Without a coalition, we aren't strong enough, not enough momentum for our cause. Organizing is about power. We are attempting to realize our vision for the world, the things that we want to see in terms of public policy, and we're usually building and wielding power within structures that often don't see things our way. So being right is not enough. We have to be clear about what we want to win. We have to be clear about who the decision makers are we need to impact. And we need to be clear about how much power we need to build to be able to do that. So it's about power. Moral arguments help us make the case, help us create the narrative. But at the end of the day, we have to build the power we need to get folks on our side. So we define organizing as being the process in which people impacted by injustice take collective action to build the power we need to win meaningful change in our lives and in our communities. Organizing centers people most impacted in crafting the solution to the problem. And then those folks bring more people into the process so that we can take action together, collectively. In activism, often people speak out and step forward and make the case on their own. Organizing says we bring people together, and through bringing people together, we are creating more power than we could alone to then shape the policies that impact our lives and our communities based on our vision for justice. So when we think organizing, think centers people most impacted by injustice, looks at creating a plan based on collective action, and is very concretely considering how much power we need to build to win the things we need to make our lives and our world better. Organizing often involves winning changes in either policy or practice, resource distribution, living conditions, and it often involves us winning changes from people who hold power in public or private institutions. So if we're organizing, we want to shift public policy, we're looking at possibly having to put pressure on policymakers or legislators to win them to our side. If we're trying to shift changes in working conditions or sometimes in more corporate settings, then we have to put pressure on decision makers that may be in private institutions or structures. Still thinking about how are we centering people most impacted, taking action together, building power, strategically winning. We also say organizing is fundamentally about justice, grassroots democracy, and self-determination. And by that we mean that people that are often disenfranchised, marginalized, are the people who come together and the people who are crafting a vision for justice, crafting solutions to their own problems, and then building and creating organizations that allow them to work on these problems for the long haul. So now let's just dig back in here and just walk a little more along this process. So we've defined organizing. Folks impacted by injustice, taking collective action, building the power we need to bring about change in our lives and communities. We know that sometimes the solutions that we create involve pushing for a change in public policy or resource distribution. And we know that it's about building democracy at the grassroots level. Now, we say if you are involved in direct action organizing, you should be doing three things. One, winning concrete improvements in people's lives. We want to make sure that the solutions that we bring forward are solutions that are winning real change because we are often engaging people who have been impacted by gender injustice, systemic racism, and dedicating their precious time and life energy to working with us. So we want to make sure that we're being strategic. We're actually winning change. We want to make people aware of their own power. We live in a society in which, unfortunately, inequality and inequity is structured into many of the institutions that we look to for justice. So when we bring people together in organizing, we're saying through working together, we are powerful. So we want to make sure that people have a sense of their own agency and the power of working collectively. So organizing is about making sure that we're making folks aware of their own power to create the type of change that they want to see. And good organizing should alter the relations of power. We want to build strong organizations that are vehicles to fight and push for the structural change we want to see for the long haul. We also want to pass new laws and regulations that give more power to the people. We want to elect people that are accountable to us, and we want to build a movement. We know that often the work that we take on, especially when we're trying to impact structural change, is work that we can't do alone in our individual organizations. It's often work that we have to do in coalition with other organizations. So we want to make sure that we keep our eye on building the movement as well. So in the Midwest Academy, we always like to share this quote by Frederick Douglass, who was someone who fought against the enslavement of Black people in this country. And he talked a little bit about sort of the fact that you have to be willing to push, and you have to be willing to build and wield power to win in ways that create what we know that John Lewis called some good trouble. So I'll read this quote. "Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are those who want crops without plowing up the ground, rain without the thunder, the ocean without the awful roar of its waters. It must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will." I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second. Organizing is about power. It's about clearly defining what we want to win, bringing people together, as many people as we need to collectively examine what's a good solution to this problem, who are the decision makers that have the power to give us what we want, and then how do we strategically put pressure on them. So, are there any questions that you all would like to ask? If you can just drop them in the chat, I will come out of the slides periodically and check the chat so that I can answer questions. So it's a little bit of a balancing act here between moving from presentation mode and the chat, but I'll try to be thoughtful about it as we go forward. But I just want to stop in terms of how we define organizing, how it's different from other methods and approaches to winning social change. Are there any questions? We're good? We got the thumbs up? Okay, I'm going forward.
We've got one question down there, but I just want to
Okay,
let
one
everybody know,
question.
if you guys use the Q&A tool, it'll just pop up on Jay's screen so that she won't have to, come in and out of sharing so that she can see it, make her life a little bit easier.
So someone says, how do we get in good trouble safely? And build coalitions that we can trust. So when I talk about strategy, when I get to the constituencies and column, I'm going to talk a great deal about coalition building. So I have that question, I'm flagging it, and I'll make sure that I address it. Thank you for that question too. It's a great question. So let's talk a little bit about what happens when we organize. So often when we're organizing, we're working with folks that have been impacted by injustice. So we are working with people to get an idea. Well, okay, here we go. For some reason, the screen disappeared. We're working with people to get an idea of what they care about, what they're concerned about. And then as we get a clearer idea of what they're concerned about, we're getting a better sense of the problem or what's wrong. What is that thing that burns in the gut that's disturbing them most, that is something that we might be able to use to motivate them to action? So what is the problem? What is wrong? Sometimes, problems will choose us. So we talk to people about their sense of what is unjust or what is the problem they're experiencing. And then through organizing and through the process of coming together, we then together craft a solution to that problem. We call the problem, what's wrong or what's burning in the belly, what's the issue? What's the challenge? We call the issue our solution to the problem. So we agitate around problems. We talk to people about what's wrong. We get a sense about how it's impacting them. We get a sense about what might motivate them to action. And then together we craft a solution to that problem, which is our issue. So we say we agitate around problems, but we organize around issues. I'll give an example. On the problem side, you might say there is a lack of decent quality housing for low income and working people. On the solution side, you might say that we need to create an affordable housing fund. Problem, lack of housing for low income and working families. Solution, affordable housing fund. So again, the affordable housing fund is the solution that folks with the problem developed. So before we jump into strategy, I think it's really important to understand the distinction, because with the strategy, once we've identified our demands, once we've identified our solution, the particular solution we want to win, that's when we develop our overall strategy and do our power analysis to win it. So I'm going to check in the chat again. I would like to know who to win back, folks who have been disenchanted with the fight for justice, may be tired of waiting. Fighting for the long haul. We'll talk about that. I don't have a complete solution to it, but I can share some of my experiences with having to re-engage folks who had grown disenchanted with being involved in a particular organization. I'll make sure that I incorporate that question too. So let's look at strategy development. So again, once we have identified our particular issue, which is the solution to the problem that we have created, that's when we move into organizing strategy. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And just as you all stopped, there's a question?
Can you see the Q&A popping up? Are you able to see?
I can't.
Okay, great.
I can see the chat.
You don't see a Q&A, like a little box?
Oh, hold on a second. Okay, there's another Q&A. How do you identify a policy goal? So I was watching the chat and the Q&A. Maybe I should just watch the Q&A. Okay. So the process to identifying a policy goal is sometimes what we would call choosing an issue. And so remember, I'm condensing a lot of information into a short time period, but we have a whole process that's involved in choosing issues. So I'm going to show you something else right now because I got to get to strategy quick or Amir is going to be after me. So
We're good. We're good. You're doing a good. You're okay.
And also, too, the Midwest Academy has a full multi-day training that we can actually, at one point, we could talk with you all about. But I'm going to share my screen once more and talk a little bit about choosing issues before we go into strategy development. Okay, so just stop right here. So when we're working in community, we are often working with folks that have been inundated by numerous problems. So when we think about our organization, we think about the people that are a part of our organization, and we're working with our people to figure out which issue we decide to take on based on what our members care about, based on often what the political context and climate might be, based on our organization's capacity. We sort of think about a few key areas. One is the particular problem and issue being broadly felt by the people that are a part of your organization or the people you would like to become a part of your organization. Is the issue that you identify winnable? By winnable, we mean, does it have a clear solution, and does it have a clear set of decision makers you can target and put pressure on to win what you want? Does the issue help to build organizational power? Is this an issue that could help you recruit even more people to fight with your organization for justice for the long haul? Is it an opportunity for you all to be bold and to really push for the structural change you want to see? And is it an issue that helps to put you on the trajectory to help build a movement? Fully understanding that many of the challenges that we face and that we're up against put us up against structural power and injustice. So this is a set of questions that you might ask as you are thinking about choosing your issue. It's a conversation you would have with your organization. We also have a checklist to help people think about choosing issues. One, is the particular solution that you came up with one that wins real improvements, gives people a sense of their own power, and helps to build more power for us? Does it alter the relations of power? And then also, does it help to set you up for another campaign in which you can build even more power? And does it help to challenge structural inequality? So when we think about moving from problems to issues, we think about what matters most to the people in our organization now. Is this particular issue being deeply felt by people? Is it something we could use to recruit even more people into our organization to build power for the long term? That's a little bit of how we start to think about the issue, because the issue is often a change. Our solution might be a change in public policy. Our solution might be a change in a budget and how money in a budget is being allocated. Our solution might be a change in a state regulation or municipal regulation. So often the solutions that we pick, we craft into public policy that can help us impact the lives of the people that we're working with more positively. Does that make sense? Did I answer the question? So you identify a policy goal by asking yourself a set of questions with the people that are in your organization. First, you look at the problem, then you discuss potential solutions to those problems, and the solution that you discuss may require a change in public policy to realize it. So in Chicago, we do not have the right to elect our school board. That is terrible. And so often when people in our community would want to see our school district implement policies or allocate the budget in a way that would allow for more racial equity in the school system, we realized that in order to really get an accountable school board, we needed to create a people's school board or an elected representative school board. That required a change in state law because the state of Illinois allowed the mayor of Chicago many years ago to advocate for a policy that allowed mayors of Chicago to elect the school board. So in order for us to realize the kind of democracy we need, which is our solution, we have to change the state law in order to do it. So how do you work with your people to identify your goal? And then based on that goal, if it's a change in public policy, how do you craft that together with your people to make sure that it really gets to the root cause of the problem? Any other questions about how you identify policy goals? I'm going to go to the chat now too. Okay, so are we ready to move to strategy development? We're okay? Yes, okay. All right, because now I'm running low on time, so let me get in here. So strategy. Once we have worked with our people and we have identified our solution to the problems we are experiencing, fully realizing that some of those solutions might require us to change public policy, we then move to strategy development. So strategy is our overall plan to build the power we need to win on our solution or our goal. It's our overall plan. What do we want to win? Is it a change in public policy? Is it a change in a practice in a private institution? And once we've identified what we want to win, then we think about who are the decision makers that have the power to give us what we want. And then we do a concrete power analysis. We unpack how much power they have. And then we figure out how we build the power we need to put pressure on those decision makers strategically to give us what we want. Now, there is a distinction between strategy and tactics. Tactics are a part of our overall strategy, but tactics are in and of themselves alone not enough. In fact, tactics are action steps that you take within your strategy to demonstrate power to your decision maker. So in and of themselves, they are not enough. So when we start thinking about strategy development, remember, we've already gone through the process with our people to figure out what is our solution to the problem we're experiencing. And if it requires a change in public policy, then who are the decision makers? So this strategy development lets us collectively, in a systematic way, think about power. It allows us to do a power analysis. What do we want to win? And then how do we concretely unpack the power we need to win it? And what I love about how we develop strategy is it is a collective process because it engages people most impacted by the problem. It engages allies. It brings together people to figure out a good solution. And ultimately, good strategy development strengthens our organizing abilities for the long haul. So let's talk a little bit about the Midwest Academy strategy chart. The strategy chart is a tool that we use at the Midwest Academy to help us think about strategy. And we unpack it in a very systematic and intentional way. First, we look at the goals column and we say, what do we want to win? Then we look at the organizational considerations column and we think about what are the resources and people power we have to put in the fight. But then we get to the constituents and allies column, which is where a lot of our people power is concentrated. And that's the column in which we think about how many people do we need to bring into this fight in order to put pressure strategically on the decision maker. In the target column, that's our decision maker. That's who we think about in terms of the people who have the power to give us what we want. How much power do they have? How much power do we need to put pressure on them? And then the tactics column. How do we strategically put pressure on decision makers so that they will support our solution to the problem? So in organizing, and for some reason I cannot get my particular arrow. Let's come out of screen sharing for a second. In organizing, we define power more narrowly. So when you think of power more broadly, people may say, well, power is the ability to make your vision a reality. Or as Dr. King said, power is the ability to achieve purpose. And whether it's good or bad depends on the person that's trying to build power. But with direct action organizing, we use a very narrow, specific definition of power. We say in direct action organizing that power is the ability to get a decision maker to say yes to you, though they may not want to. And the reason we define power in a very narrow way when we're talking about organizing is because that is what sets us up to do our power analysis. We hone in on who has the ability to give us what we want, and then how do we strategically build the power we need to push that person to help us realize our goal. So the strategy chart poses a set of questions in each column that helps us to create our strategy. In the goal column, we look at our long-term goal, our intermediate goal, our short-term goal. In the organizational consideration column, we look at the resources we have to put in the fight, and we look at how we want to build and strengthen our organization as a result of this fight. In the constituency and people power column, we think a great deal about who cares about this issue, who cares about this issue that is not a part of our organization. How can we possibly build some coalitions we need to build the power we need? Then we move to our decision maker column. Set of questions there about the power we need to push. And then our tactics column, how will we wield the power we're building? So let's start with the goals column. Someone asked a question about policy goals. So in the goals column, we often start with our long-term or big picture visionary goal. It's really important because a lot of the issues that we are struggling for and fighting for require us to have a long-term vision for justice, because often we're up against change that is institutional and structural. So we want to make sure that we always have our eyes on the prize and our big picture vision. So if someone is working to address the housing needs of low-income and working people, their long-term visionary goal might be affordable housing for all state residents. But as you start to move deeper into what your particular solution is, that's your intermediate goal. So when you think long-term, think big picture vision, the world you want to create. When you think intermediate, that is where your campaign goal sits. That is your particular solution to the problem your people are facing. So intermediate always trigger campaign goal. So these folks want to see affordable housing for all people eventually, but in the immediate sense, they want a state law establishing rent control. That is their particular solution to the problem that they're fighting for right now. Now, their short-term goal would be to get a particular decision maker to vote yes for this law. So you see, long-term, visionary, intermediate, what is your campaign goal? And then short-term, get Rep. Smith to vote yes for your particular policy recommendation. Now, this goal column is extraordinarily important because remember, this chart works like a spreadsheet. So you want to make sure that you're crystal clear in this intermediate goal about what you want to win, because that informs your short-term goal. And that short-term goal zeroes in on a decision maker. And that's the decision maker that you need to move in order to get you what you want. Any questions? I'm just coming out and I'm going into Q&A. Any questions about anything I've shared about the goal column? How do you balance your focus between short-term and long-term goals? Very good question. I think a good way to do that is when we're working with people that are a part of our organizations, it's a very dynamic process. And it's that choosing issues section gives you some sense of the questions that you're constantly asking within your organization. So often there are problems that bubble up that allow us to engage our folks in identifying solutions that address immediate needs, but also help us build stronger organizations to fight for that long-term power. So I would say a good way to balance that is that constant conversation and campaign development with the folks that you are organizing, so that we know, and for example, with folks that are fighting against systemic racism in public education, we may say our long-term goal is to make sure that there's racial equity in the overall education system. Our intermediate goal would be to win $25 million to support sustainable community schools, which allow equity. So what's the balance between the conversations you're having with people more impacted, how you then choose those issues, and then how each campaign should set you up to achieve your long-term goal? It's like a constant dynamic process. So which issues do you select and build campaigns on, and how do they put you on the trajectory to moving towards your long-term goals? All things to keep in mind. So I'm going to come back, share my screen again. And so that's the goals column. That's the first column in the strategy chart. So the next column deals with organizational capacity. What resources do we have to put in the fight? And then how will we build our organization as a result of being involved in this fight? So again, this is a category in which we want to make sure that we're quantifying, we're adding numbers. So if we take on a campaign for rent control, how many staff people do we have to work on this campaign? Are there 20 leaders in our organization that want to see this campaign happen? Are there 20 other volunteers or members that want to see this campaign happen? Do we have funding that we can put into this fight? Can we set aside $5,000 for this fight? And then, does this fight allow us to build relationships with other people in our community and other folks that might care about this issue? So that's the what do we have to put in the fight column. And then what we need is, how do we want to build our organization? As a result of taking on this particular goal, can we recruit new members? How many do we want to recruit? How many more allies can we recruit? Can we grow our social media list in concrete ways? And then are there internal conflicts? Does this particular issue rub some of our members better than it rubs others? How do we address that? Or do we have enough people power on our staff to work on these issues? Are people feeling overburdened and burnout? That internal conflicts section lets us unpack that a bit. So again, long-term goal, that intermediate goal is our campaign goal. That short-term goal deals with the decision maker that we need to move. Organizational capacity, how much do we have to put in the fight? How do we want to build our organization as a result of being in this fight? The constituents and allies column. This is one of my favorite columns. It reminds me of a chant that I often hear when we're out doing public actions and people chant, how we're going to get it, people power. I love that chant. So in organizing, a primary source of our power is the people that we can bring in to the fight. So this is the column that lets us unpack who is directly impacted by this issue. And who are the people that are in our sphere that care about this? But then who are people that are outside of our organization that might also care about this? So they're not a member of our group, but they will be with us for this fight. How are they organized? How can we then bring them into coalition with us to win? So this constituents column lets you unpack all of the power you need to build and bring into the fight to win your particular issue. Now, after you've looked at how many people care about this fight, how many people can you bring in, you've looked at allies who may also have some power over the decision maker, you want to think about your opponents. Now, there's a distinction between your opponents and your targets. You all tell me, what do you all think the distinction is between the opponent and the target? And I'm liking what I see in this chat. Long-term, eradicate period poverty. Intermediate, free period products in schools. Short-term, get local school board. Yeah, but we're gonna unpack what you got in that short-term, because when you do your strategy chart, you would drill down to the specific school board member that you want to put pressure on. So I'm going to talk about what Michaela laid out, which is excellent, because often what she did is laid out our big picture strategy chart goal. But when we do our individual strategy charts on decision makers, that's when we hone in on that one decision maker and we build out a whole strategy chart on what it's going to take to get that particular decision maker to give us what we want. So the target can make the change. The opponent does not want to make the change. That's right. And often the opponent sometimes brings what on their side? We're coming into the room with our people power. We're putting pressure on the decision maker. What does the opponent often bring into the room to put pressure on the other side on the decision? So simply said, money. That's right, money and institutional power. That's right. That opponent is coming in and saying, I enjoy the particular profit that I'm getting, usually at the expense of women, LGBTQ, people of color. I like sort of the way things are set up. I like the profits that I'm getting based on the current arrangement. I don't want to see the change that you all want to see. And so as we're putting pressure, bringing in our power with organized folks, the other side is usually coming in and putting pressure on decision makers and bringing money into the process. Now, we're moving along. Remember, we're in our spreadsheet. We've identified what we want to win. We've looked at what we got to put into the fight. We've looked at who we can bring into the fight that often can put some pressure on this target or decision maker. So what do we mean by the target? It's the person with the power to give you what you want. So if you are pushing for public policy, then the people who have the power to give you what you want are legislators. If you're pushing for changes in the corporate structure, the people who have the power to give you what you want may be that CEO or that CEO's board. So we want to think concretely about power. Decision makers are always people and not institutions. You all tell me why. If I want rent control, why can't I just say the state legislature is my target? You got a good question here. I see this question about the people most impacted. I'm going to come back to it. But the question I'm posing now is, why is it not good enough to just say the state legislature or the school board or the city council? Why is it not good enough? Okay, that's right. Each legislator in those bodies is an individual person who has their own vulnerabilities. So when we're strategically doing our power analysis and we're unpacking the power of those individuals, we break them down into individual actors so that we can see how much power we need to build to move them as individuals. That's very, very important, because that lets us do concrete power analysis and wield power strategically. Instead of just looking at one whole body, we look at the individuals that make up that body, and we unpack the power they hold and we push them to our side. I'm going to come back to that piece on marginalized communities too. Am I making sense so far? So, coming back to this decision maker column, we break it down into the individual decision maker. Remember, in my goals column, we wanted to win that state law, but our strategy chart was built around Representative Smith. So when we're unpacking the power of decision makers that are legislators, we go to those election results. How many votes did they win by in their last few elections? We look at who's investing in their campaigns. Who are their donors? We look at, do they have higher ambition? Do they want to move to another level in government? We look at, are there potential rivals on the horizon? People that our people might potentially get behind if this decision maker doesn't come to our side. And we say, your group has power if you can push a consequence if the target says no to you. Now, when we're thinking about decision makers in a legislative body, and this gets back to the piece that was put in the chat, we may do one big strategy chart to say, we want to pass a state law. We look at the state legislature and we do a tally. Who's with us? Who's against us? Are there swing votes? Who's on the fence? And often we would start to hone in here and start to pull out legislators and do individual strategy charts on those legislators that lets us unpack the power that we need to build to get those legislators on our side. So again, concrete power analysis. Who is the decision maker? How much power do they have? We do the research on them. How much are they winning their elections by? Who's donating to their campaigns? Are there rivals? Are there other vulnerabilities that we can use to put pressure on those decision makers to win them to our side? Now, before I move into tactics, I want to answer that very important question that was placed in the chat about centering the voices of those most impacted by gender injustice, systemic racism, economic injustice. In the definition that we use at the Midwest Academy for Direct Action Organizing, we start from that premise. We say that you should be working with people most impacted by the problem because the people most impacted understand that problem best. and often understand the fundamental pieces of what the solution should look like to address that problem. When we decide for people that are impacted by the problem, often the solutions that we create may not get to the heart of the problem. That's why we organize with people that are most impacted, so that they can inform how we create the solution based on their real life experience, so that the solutions that we craft are close to the ground, are guided by people that are most impacted as leaders in the process, as much as we can, based on how our organizations are structured. How do you do that? A lot of that has to do with your organization structure. I come from grassroots organizing. Our membership base were folks that were most impacted. Some people come from structures that might be more advocacy focused. So how do you work in coalition with people that are most impacted so that those solutions are bubbling up from the people most impacted? And then you're working with folks most impacted to craft that solution together. So a lot of it depends on your organization structure, but can you create opportunities to partner with groups that are most impacted, partner with constituencies that are most impacted as a part of your regular process? And a lot of that, again, would depend on your organization. So I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen, because now we're at the point where we're talking about tactics. Tactics are actions that we take to show power to the decision maker. And we do it strategically. Remember, when we're in that decision-making column, we're going in, we're researching their election results. We're researching how they're raising money. So when we get to this tactics column, it's informed by the power analysis we've done on our target. So all of our tactics should be set up to show power to the decision maker. I'm gonna give you an example. So I live in the 3rd Ward in Chicago, and I have a particular person that represents me in city council. She typically wins her elections by about 3,600 votes. If I engage in tactics that only bring in about 150 people to put pressure on her, is she likely to do what I want her to do? You all tell me in the chat. She's winning by about 3,600 votes. I'm bringing in about 100 people. And she thinks that's all I got. Is she gonna do what I want her to do? You all tell me. Is it likely? I got a good firm. Nope. You all tell me why. Does she think I can challenge her? Not enough pressure. That's right. So we got to think strategically. When we're talking about tactics, how are we showing power strategically to the decision maker? How many people are we engaging in the process? If I'm trying to put pressure on this elected official and she's winning by 3,600 votes, I need to build a bit of a coalition in her ward to show that at least about 4,000 people care about this issue. So when I'm mapping out my tactics, if I'm doing phone calls, if I'm doing petitions, if I'm doing public meetings, I got to think, what kind of coalition do I need to build to show that at least 4,000 people care about this? Other than that, she won't move to my side. So think, how much power do we need to wield? See, we're building power, but then how do we demonstrate it to these decision makers based on our power analysis? All of these particular sections in this tactics column should have numbers behind them, because those numbers show a number of people that we're bringing into the process to demonstrate power to the target. So again, this is our overall strategy chart. It lets us look at what we need to do to win on our campaigns, which are our solutions to address the problems that we see and to fight for our long-term vision. So with our strategy chart, we say, when we look at this tactics column, that the tactics are what our constituents and allies do to the decision maker to win our short-term goal to build the power we need to build our organization. Tactics are what we do to the decision maker to win our short-term goal, to help build our organization, to fight for the long haul. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just walk through this example that Michaela put in the chat because it's so good. Where is that? Yeah, I'm going back to this long-term goal column. So based on what I shared, how might we dig a little bit deeper here? What would our short-term goal be based on what I shared? This would, Michaela did our big chart, which is where we might tally who's with us or who's against us. But if we're honing in on a particular decision maker, we would be honing in on what related to Michaela's example, or who. So if the intermediate goal or our campaign goal is free products, we got the school board. But remember, that's our big strat. When we do our individual strategy chart, our short-term goal, I'm gonna share my screen one more time. Come on, back out of here. Go back. Okay, come out. The glories of Zoom, right? And I'm going to make sure that each of you have this strategy chart. So the intermediate goal is your campaign goal or what you want to win. But your short-term goal hones in on a particular decision maker. Because that decision maker is where you are doing your power analysis and figuring out how many people you need to bring into the fight, and then how those people will show power to the target. So coming back to Michaela's example, then that's right, an individual on the school board would be your target. And then you would do a strategy chart that looked at how many votes did that school board member win his last election by? And that would inform how many people you need to bring into the fight and how many people you need to get engaged in terms of tactics to put pressure on that decision maker. And the type of coalitions, that's right, someone put in there, that are mission aligned. Now, does that make, am I making sense? Because I'm used to usually going back and forth with the participants in the presentation. So this format is a little different for me. Any questions? I've already gone over time. I'm sorry. Any questions about strategy? And again, at the Midwest Academy, we have a whole training, and we would take typically, several hours to unpack strategy. We do a strategy exercise around a relevant policy area, which lets people practice creating their own strategy chart. So I just want to make sure you know the training, and the full training is available to you. And then also strategy development support is available too. We often help people think through each column of the strategy chart to win their campaign goals. So any questions before I close out? Okay, so I'll just do a quick recap. With organizing, we say it's people impacted by injustice, taking collective action to build the power we need to win on our issues. That often requires a change in public policy or a change in resource distribution. And it often requires us to put pressure on decision makers in either public or private institutions. Problems are what's wrong. Issues are our solution to the problem. And strategy, overall plan to build the power we need to win. We hone in on that decision maker. We do that concrete power analysis, and then we're strategic in our tactics. With that, Amir, should I close out and just say goodbye?
Hey, not before I say a couple things, because the truth is this: This was not only a training, this was a master class. Jay, this was amazing. Thank you so much for your time, really. And you know, we really, really hope that we'll be able to continue working with Jay here. And you know, if we continue to follow the lead of leaders like Jay, then we'll have the power to make any change that we need. And it's just been really an honor having you lead this for us. So hopefully in the future we'll have Jay back to lead more of these. And Jay, as you mentioned, you're going to be sending out the chart.
I'll send you the strategy chart, and I'll send you some of the slides,
Great.
just so that you all can have them.
Great. So we'll make sure everyone has that, and that'll be up on our Period Action Day website right under this recording.
And I want to say just thank you all for the work you're doing. It's so important, and I know that you all know, being from a community deeply impacted by systemic racism, we experience the problems in ways that are just really, really detrimental often to our ability to live with some dignity. So your work is so important. Thank you for having me, and have us come back at any time.
We will. We will for sure. We'll continue. We'll follow up with you. So everyone else on here today, thank you guys for being here. At 11 a.m. here in the next 45 minutes, we're going to have a panel discussion, a panel interview we'd love for you all to be on. So just head over to the website and check that out. And then again at 2 p.m., we're going to have a keynote speaker and Madam Gandhi joining us as well. So if you go onto periodactionday.com, you could find the information there, and you'll find the links of where to join. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you in 45 minutes. Bye.